Today we are going to go through the process of building product-based context in the Quartic platform, which contextualizes your data based on your products, batches, and recipes. This allows you to then search, use, and analyze your data in this product or batch-based context. So for example, build a machine learning model for predictive quality in the context of a specific product run, rather than just on an asset or time-based. And adding this additional contextual slice, we'll call it, is often valuable and can produce better results and analytical insights because it is more focused on that product. So with that, let's hop into the Quartic platform and get started on creating this context. So I'm in this product harbor module of the platform. And we can see there's already several products listed out here. I'll actually create a new one just so we can start from scratch. So I'll give this name QMAB. So this will be a Quartic monoclonal antibody. And then everything within the platform is tracked via electronic signatures for auditing purposes for GxP compliance. So we have to add in my login there. So I have this new product, and now I can come in and generate a new recipe for this. So this will also be QMAB, and it's going to be at my pharmaco site, which I have already configured. So I'll add this recipe, again, electronic signature. And now this will create also a top-level procedure. So within this recipe configuration, we'll be able to create a full ISA 88 product hierarchy of procedures, unit procedures, operations, phases, phase steps. And at each step, we'll also be able to assign critical process parameters, critical quality attributes, and their associated control strategies, so we can set up real-time quality monitoring on top of this recipe. But before we get into that, let's actually build out this recipe a little bit. So we have this QMAB. What you'll notice is for each layer that I add here, we can configure the rule triggers over at the right. So I can add, for example, a unit procedure, and this is going to be a fermentation layer, and this is what I'll focus on for most of this. So fermentation. And again, I have my start rules, my stop rules. Most of these, what I have the option of is, so I can either come in and set a specific rule. So if I have like a trigger or a start tag or a batch tag for, say, at my unit procedure level, I can enter that. Or I can just say maybe it's only triggering off of my operations. So if I add in, say, a 3,000 liter bioreactor, I could add in rules at this operation level and then have my higher levels trigger off of that. So I can just say defer to the start rule of the first child and defer to the stop rule. In that case, if I set rules for this 3,000 liter reactor, my fermentation will get the rules from that. And I can continue down that chain. So now under this reactor, I have a couple different phases I want to configure as well. And the phases I have defined for this are as follows. So I start with a standby, then I have a steam in place, post SIP, inoculation, fermentation, transfer, and CIP. Now this, I can choose which ones of these I want to include in my actual recipe in my batch. For this particular procedure I have set up, the SIP is actually included in the standing operating procedure of the recipe and of the batch, so I'm going to include that, but maybe in some cases you may not start your actual batch run until the inoculation phase. So when I set up my phases that I want to configure, I'm going to use these 5, SIP through transfer, as the 5 phases of my batch. And I'll be able to use these values to trigger that. So when my batch phase goes into 2 or into this SIP phase, that'll signal the start of my batch. When we transfer from 6 into a 7 or into that CIP phase, that will trigger the end of my batch. So I just want to show you those different values for my batch phase tag that I'll be using to configure these rules. First, at the operation level, this bioreactor, I will assign an asset to it. So I'll just click select, and then this will list out all the assets that are associated with my site. In this case, I want to use my 3,000 liter bioreactor. Now I'll come in and add in those phases. So again, the first phase I had was a SIP phase. Then I want to add my post SIP. All right, so now I've added in those phases. Now I have to add in my rules for each one of these phases for when it's going to start and stop. So starting with my SIP, again, I looked at that value. I also want to map in my batch ID tag here. So my batch ID is going to come from this batch tag that I have. Again, this is associated with the 3,000 liter reactor that I've attached to this phase. So now to configure the rules, so for the SIP phase, again, that value of my batch phase tag is going to be when it equals to 2. So I can find my batch phase tag. This will trigger when this is equal to a value of 2. And I do have a deadband here available if needed, so I just have if it's true for 1 second, that'll trigger it. So I don't need a deadband here, but there may be some case where you want that. So I'll confirm this. And then my stop rule is simply going to be when we transition into that post SIP. So when that value changes from 2 to 3, that's going to be my stop rule. So I'll use that same batch phase tag when that becomes equal to a value of 3. That's going to signal the stop. Again, because this is the first phase of my operation of this 3,000 liter reactor, because this one is deferring to the start rule. So this 3,000 liter bioreactor operation will start at the same time that this SIP rule triggers. So those are automatically linked together. Then for the rest of these, it's going to be the same exact configuration. So it's just, for example, for my post SIP now, instead of starting at 2, I'm going to use that same batch phase. This one will start when this is equal to a value of 3, and it's going to end when it's equal to a value of 4. Right. So I'll speed this up a little bit and go through and finish this configuration. All right, so now I've gone through and I've configured these rules for all of my phases, and we can see these green check marks that the configuration is good for all of them. One thing I will point out is do make sure every time you go through and configure this for any one of these steps, so a phase, operation, make sure when you make a change you click the save button, because once you click off of one of these phases, any changes will be lost, just so you know. So you have to click save every time you make it, anytime you're on a particular phase before you switch to another one. All right, so I can add more operations to this, and I will go back and show you a completed one with this built out a bit more. But for now, I'll stop with this, and I want to go through and test and deploy this now. So this would be the next step. So what I can do is run this against historical data, historical batches, and make sure that it's working as expected. So I'll go ahead and click test and deploy. And then I can come in and choose a time range here, and I know I have some good batches back, just because this is a data set we uploaded, it's back in 2020. So I will choose from March, go up through the end of June. I'll set my time range, and I'll just say test for range, and then this window will pop up letting you know that it's running. So you can just go to the home page, continue doing whatever else you want in the platform, and then that will continue running in the background and let you know once it's all done. You can also check the status on this as it's running. You can see this testing in progress. So we'll just wait for this to complete. All right, great. So you can see that our status is now updated to testing completed. So now I can come in and view the results of that. So view test. And this will show me for all the batch runs that we have, we're able to go through and actually see all the start times and end times for my overall procedure, my unit procedure, and my individual phases, and make sure that this all looks valid. This will run some checks to ensure, for example, my last phase is outside of the time range. So like the time range of my phases aren't outside of the time ranges of my overall procedure. So it's doing some checks in here to ensure there's no issues. If there are any things with times outside of ranges it's supposed to be, or overlapping things where there shouldn't be overlap, or if there's data missing, these batches will be marked with a questionable quality. So these question marks will be red. But all the ones that we ran are green, which is perfect. That's what we want, which now allows us to deploy this recipe. So I can click on deploy. And now this will start running in real time and creating those batches in real time as data is streaming in. And then as that's being created, we can also come into our batch explorer. Again, no live batches have been created yet, so this is currently blank, but as batches come in, this will be populated. One other thing you'll notice is that now that this recipe is deployed, I'm no longer able to edit it. So if I want to make any changes to this recipe, for example, if I want to add in more operations, so far it's only that one 3,000 liter reactor, I have to first deactivate it and add my electronic signature. And then once it's deactivated, I'm then able to go in and edit, retest, and redeploy. So I'll go through and I will actually add in some additional process units here just to build this out a little bit more. All right, so I've now gone in and I've added in my other operations for my fermentation piece. So I can come in and expand any of these out. We'll notice that each of the reactors have very similar stages versus my shake flask and my incubator, but we're able to see now all the way down to the phase level, the rules configured for each one of these, and now this is ready to go through and test and deploy. Just like we did before when it was just a 3,000 liter reactor, it'll be the same process. I'm sticking with just the fermentation unit procedure, but we could also add in clarification, purification, those additional downstream steps that are performed after this. We'll just stick with this test and deploy. I'll use that same time range again. Start this test. Great, so now we can see here that this testing completed successfully after adding in those additional operations and phases for other units, other reactors. The next step will be to go in and add in CQAs and CPPs to this. But this video is already getting a little bit long, so I'll actually do this in another video, tying in those critical quality attributes and critical process parameters. But this so far covers how to build this product in batch context in terms of the recipe, how to test it and deploy it, creating this product-based contextualization layer that makes it faster and easier to find and consume your process data based on this product perspective. Then once we can incorporate these CQAs and CPPs, as well as the control strategies, this whole package will enable and support a digital CPV program, which becomes a powerful tool. I will also say that this part of the platform is relatively new, so we're adding new features and integrations to it continuously, so if you have any feedback or suggestions, or if you have any questions, please reach out to us here at Quartic.